Hi everyone, welcome to the third episode of our podcast series. We've finally got ourselves a name, which is very exciting news. So this is our X-Files podcast, episode 3. Today, as the previous episodes, I'm joined by my colleague Peter Lowe, who is the senior partner in our family team. And today we've got a very special guest, and I'm joined by Laura Stocks, who is our senior associate. And Laura's got lots and lots of experience of dealing with all types of financial matters, along with complex children matters and everything else that a family lawyer deals with. Today, following on from our second podcast, we are going to be looking at some more reports from Legal in General, and the effect of the cost of living crisis and the reduced numbers of people that are divorcing, and just expand upon some of those topics that we discussed last time, and also the University of Bristol report that looked at finalising finances and pension sharing. So I'm going to hand over to Peter, who's going to talk us through some of those points.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, thanks. The key point that really came out of the second podcast that a lot of people have given us some feedback on is this amazing statistic that only 11% of divorcees actually have a pension share when they go through a divorce. It certainly shocked all of us in the office here, and I think in the wider world that seems to be an incredibly low number. And so given the importance of that and the importance of pension generally, and the fact that the Pension Advisory Group have just released a couple of days ago their second updated guide as to how to value and to share pensions on divorce, I think we make no apologies for continuing to focus on that area of the law and the importance that it brings. There are any number of reports, and the Legal in General certainly produced one called The Divorce Gap in 2021, which pointed to national statistics about how typically women in this situation have significantly smaller pension pots following a divorce, and are still significantly more likely to waive rights to a partner's pension when a divorce takes place. I mean, it's about a third of people who are prepared to do that. And the long-term outcome, again, for stereotypically women in this situation, is that they have far less personal wealth on retirement and far less provision for themselves to look after themselves in their old age. The statistics are very significant. For people over 65, most men have a wealth in pensions of about £220,000, where by contrast most women have a valuation of about £110,000. So that's a really important perspective, and I think it shows the importance of pension share, and what's that showing is the consequence of not actually dealing with the pension sharing orders that are required in the vast majority of divorce cases. I don't think this all works one way either. From, again, typically a husband's perspective, we talked, I think, in the first podcast about the importance of having a really balanced settlement, to think about things over the long term. And whilst, there may be a situation where people are prepared to waive that pension right and take a property, for example, instead of taking a pension share, for those who maintain their pensions but don't take anything out of the family home, they're starting from scratch as well, about creating a home for themselves and building some wealth in that way. Now, while that may have been relatively easy over the last 10, 15 years, when money was easily available, mortgage rates were very low, and there wasn't the same kind of eligibility criteria, one of the things that we're certainly finding, I think, is that the difficulty of getting back onto the ladder if you fall off it. And so it all tends to move towards a situation where divorce settlements are increasingly having to be very well balanced. And you look at the longer term, which is absolutely crucial, because it may well be that pension sharing in more cases and a fairer share of the assets that are available immediately provides a better outcome for both parties as they go through the divorce. So that's a very long-winded and kind of generalised approach to this, but it is a truism that there are very few pension sharing orders, and the outcomes for people when they get to retirement show a complete disconnect between that having taken place and the fact that their wealth is very different at the point at which they choose to retire. Just one other point that I'd like to make is in relation to, again, some very good guidance that came out this time from the University of Manchester. It's about 18 months old now, this, but they produced a survival guide to pensions. And that was very simple in its outcome. It said it's absolutely vital that you find out when you're going through this kind of separation and divorce, simply how much pensions are worth and how to divide them fairly. And that by simply ignoring them or trading them away, they came to exactly the same conclusions as we've had recently, which it leads, or is more likely to lead, people into poverty in their later life.
At the back of that, some people might want to know sort of what the criteria is for sort of valuing and dividing up pensions. Well, in July 2019, we had the first edition of the Pension Advisory Group report, otherwise known as the PAG report, which took account of all of those involved in the area of pensions on divorce. That established clear ground rules for the proper approach to be taken in cases. We had the Family Justice Council, the University of Cambridge and the Nuffield Foundation all involved with that, and it came to, I think, 160 pages. It provided help with gathering information, single joint pension on divorce experts, otherwise known as PODs, the methods of dividing pensions, and to help people reach an agreement, and then that can be reflected in an order. It provided advice in relation to pension freedoms, state pensions, tax issues. And then we've now just had the second edition of that report launched, and that came out on the 16th of January this year. Again, the Nuffield Foundation funded that as their mission is to advance social wellbeing. So the new report builds on the good practice of the first edition, and it's got lots of new features, I believe, Peter?
Yeah, Laura, I mean, it really does begin to take into account the case law since edition 1. And it begins to draw some important distinctions out of those cases, such as, the difference between higher value cases where there's lots of money around and lower value cases, and to make sure that anything that is done with around pensions is proportionate. I mean, it's not always the way around you think it might be. Some of the higher value cases, the court have said, don't bother going down a big valuation route because there's plenty of money elsewhere. But for a lower value case, it might well be that it's absolutely crucial because the opportunity for somebody to rebuild their pension is really, really low, the chance to do that. So, and you'll have seen, I'm sure you've come aware previously, I mean, yourself, where pensions have accrued outside marriage and the need for guidance on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people come into this just presuming that any pensions accrued outside the marriage won't be taken into account. Actually quite surprised then when we tell them that's not the case in the majority of cases, actually. And so it's really good that that guidance has been beefed up. We've obviously got to look at needs and an assessment of what those are going to be, and that's got to be taken into account in relation to needs in retirement. And I think what's also really good is we've got the new letter of instruction, an updated, simplified language, which I think a lot of clients are going to find helpful.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the letters of instruction, you sometimes pass them on to clients and they think, what on earth is this? And same with ourselves sometimes. It's really complicated, and anything that simplifies the process and helps the understanding while still getting to the right result seems to be really important. And, there are things in there that we didn't anticipate, but could have ramifications for lots of our clients. Pension sharing orders that are made in overseas divorces now post-Brexit, Laura, as you know, is much more restrictive. And fortunately, the guide has picked up on that and has dealt with that immediately. And so we now have some guidance as to how those should be treated. But it is much more restricted than it once was, as you would imagine now that we're a third country sitting outside the EU. I mean, I don't know about you. I find it a very valuable assistance. I mean, has that been your experience of dealing with this report?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, pensions, I think for a lot of people are quite scary, lawyers included. And so having that there for guidance with a lot of simple language, I think it's really, really helpful for lawyers and clients.
So that's a ringing endorsement from Wright Hassall about just how essential this kind of report is. Although it goes to 160 pages or more, they haven't simplified that aspect of it. It is when pensions are involved. Look, we can't stress enough the importance of getting to grips with that longer-term, balanced, structured settlement, of which these form a crucial part. So any questions or queries around it, go and talk to somebody who knows what they're doing around it, and gain an understanding and decide if a pension sharing order is the right thing for you.
Yeah, exactly just like Peter says. And as I've sort of echoed throughout our previous podcast, I think it's really important that people get in touch if they are concerned about any of these issues or need some help in relation to any of this. It's perfectly understandable. It's very complex. And I think it's vitally important that people do seek the appropriate advice where they need to. So I've said our contact details in previous podcasts, but I'll reiterate them again. You can contact us by telephone on 01926 886688. You can send an inquiry to us through our website, or you can email us at family@wrighthassall.co.uk, and we'll be more than happy to have a chat with you.